everyone, thanks for coming to my premiere for an update on the CorePhone Master Edition. This includes updates on a lot of things, so let's just get started on all the things that we're going to be covering today. So now let's talk to the reason why I am coming here today, and that is because there's a change with the CorePhone Master Edition. We made the decision to change the design, specs, and much more about the phone. As we looked more into it, to the previous phone, we were originally having some problems. And some of those problems had to do with supply issues and many other things. And so that's why we're actually not doing that model anymore. And so now we're having a new one. But let's talk about the problems with the old model a little bit, besides the supply issues. The main problem, in my opinion, and I'm sure a lot of you would agree with me on this, was the outdated design. To be honest, the phone just looked really old with the notch. It may have been fine a couple of years ago, but now we have improved this, which I will talk about later once we get into the actual phone. Or at least the updated design of the phone. Moving on, the second problem that we had was the processor was a little bit too slow for our liking. The MediaTek 6763 processor is fine, and with software optimizations it probably would run completely okay, but we wanted something better, so we upgraded our processor, and that processor I will talk about soon. The last problem we had was supply issues. Now, as you probably know, Core is a starting cell phone company, and as we talked more and more with the previous supplier, they were only accepting us to have a sample at first, which is completely fine. But then after we would have to order at least 3,000 units, which we are completely unable to do as for the current moment. Those three main reasons, however, are all fixed now, because we are going to introduce our new updated smartphone. So, what is this smartphone going to be called? Well, this smartphone is going to be called the CorePhone 1.1 Master Edition. The updated Master Edition of this phone has improved a lot. So like we said in the previous statement, this phone has a major upgrade in terms of specs. Before, we had the MediaTek 6763 processor, and as we said, it's an okay processor, but our new processor we are using is a major improvement. That processor is called the MediaTek Helio P20. This processor should be about 25 to 50% faster than the MediaTek 6763, although we haven't tested it in depth though, so keep that in mind. As well as this, you get great RAM management with 4 GB of RAM as well as 64 GB of storage with a microSD card slot for expandable memory up to 128 GB. So overall, the specs have gotten a lot better. Now let's talk about the display. This is probably one of our biggest changes to the phone on the outside. Before we had a very large notch on the front, as well as pretty thick bezels all around. But now we have fixed this with our updated Master Edition. So as you could see, the newest updated version of the Master Edition now has a much better look, with slim bezels as well as a smaller U-notch at the top of the phone, which is too noticeable in day-to-day use. The display is pretty great with a 1080p IPS LCD display. But the most important part is that we changed the size of the display too. Previously on our last model, we had a 6.2-inch display, but I think that most people will agree that that is too small for 2020. Larger smartphone screens are better in almost every way, and it is especially important when you're watching a video, and for people who have worse vision, it might be harder for them to watch that video when the screen is too small. Another important example is gaming. With a bigger display, you could see more of what you're viewing, making it a much more enjoyable experience. So that's why we made the newest model of the Master Edition to have a 7.12-inch display. And that 7.12-inch display combined with a high-resolution panel makes viewing your phone much more pleasing. And the display is still sharp too with a PPI of 349. Overall, this phone has a significantly better panel than the last generation. Now let's go on to the previous supply issue that we had. We mostly already talked about it, but there are a couple things I do want to mention. First, the previous supplier that we had didn't have as good as a reputation in terms of on-time delivery as well as response rate. Second, this won't happen with the CorePhone 1.1 Master Edition, as not only we have already ordered the sample of this phone, we also already asked the sellers how many we should order, and they were fine with any amount that Core needs. The last thing about supply is that some are probably wondering when this phone will actually be available for purchase. As of right now, we do not have an exact date for when this phone is going to be available for purchase, but we are expecting to be ready to ship sometime before Christmas 2020. But as some of you may know from my previous premiere, I said that we will review all the products and have more in-depth looks, as well as a hands-on for all the devices that we will be releasing later this year. But we have a little bit of surprise today, because we are going to tell you the exact date for when we are actually going to be revealing these smartphones. The date for when all this is happening is on November 23rd, which is exactly 3 months from today. But not only that, we have the exact time too. The time this is going to be is happening from 5 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. Pacific time. So make sure to mark your calendars. Now let's talk about some small changes that we made to the updated Master Edition. One of the small changes we made, which may seem like a downgrade at first, is the battery. In the previous model, there was a 5,000 mAh battery. However, we made it in this model only 4,500 mAh. Some people might be confused and say, why would we even do that? Well, the reason why is because we wanted more room for the processor, and also because we don't need a 5,000 mAh battery. Some of you still might be confused, as a bigger battery is always better, right? Well, we actually put a power-efficient processor for a reason. The 4,500 mAh battery actually lasts as long as the 5,000 mAh battery because of the Helio P20 processor. So now that we got that out of the way, the second minor change that we have is 802.11 Wi-Fi. This improves the Wi-Fi we had from the previous model and makes your Wi-Fi at home much faster. Lastly, what we're going to talk about is the camera. It has been upgraded a little bit, but just the main camera. The second camera is still the same. The main camera has been upgraded from 13 megapixels to 16 megapixels. So now that basically we have talked about everything, thank you for joining this premiere. And if you'd like more information about the CorePhone 1.1 Master Edition, then check out our Instagram, which is AdamSquads with 2 S's or core.phone. Thanks for joining this premiere, and thanks for being a part of Core's future and history.